Good morning. It's Wednesday of Holy Week, and we're so glad that you've joined us this morning. It's been a great week so far, and we know we have some great speakers yet to follow in the days today and in the days ahead. So, in the moments we have before our speaker comes on, I'd like to ask you to pray with me for our speaker, Echo Wecker, and just join with me in prayer. Dear Lord, Echo has come forward when asked and spoke up and said yes right away to be one of our speakers. And we're so grateful and interested in what we have to hear from her this morning. Her experiences and her life's journey with you will be one that we look forward to hearing and know that you've laid a lot of things on her heart to share today. So calm any butterflies that she has or anything that's going to cause her to be a little bit nervous. Just let her settle into her story and be able to share that with us and to share her love for you and what she has to say. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. My name is Echo Wecker, and I, along with my husband Josh and my two daughters Zoe and Molly, are members of Marion Methodist. We've been members for about 12 years. I also help with the tech committee on Sunday mornings, and I like to do the decorations for church. So that's kind of how I'm involved. Vicki asked me one Sunday morning to share my story with you guys, and as nervous as it makes me, I do believe it's part of my healing process, and the answer was automatically yes. I knew that if I walked away from her and thought about it, I would talk myself out of it, because I'm not very proud of my story. As much as it is my story, it definitely has been a hard one to live. So I want to start out with my childhood. That's kind of where it starts. I didn't have a terrible childhood. It's actually was a pretty awesome one. So not a whole lot to tell you. There was lots of love, a few bumps in the road that bruised me along the way, but I definitely had a pretty good childhood. I grew up in southern Iowa. I didn't have a biological father that was in the picture. He definitely never reached out, tried to have a relationship with me. So it was just my mom and I for a long time. I do have a few stories of him, but never knew him personally. My mom then remarried when I was about 5 years old. The marriage that she had was definitely a violent one. I don't remember a whole lot of good. I actually don't remember a lot of it, but what I do remember were the bad times. That relationship ended very violently with my mom on the losing end of a fight that put her in the hospital, and ultimately ended up with us living in a women's and children's shelter for a while to keep us safe and to keep us behind a locked door. That was something that I don't have a lot of memories of, but I do remember the whole process of being there. And that whole memory definitely brings up some bad things, but when I was preparing for this, the verse that it really made me feel like it spoke to me on that situation was Psalm 119:50. And you'll notice that I spend a lot of time in Psalm, so all my verses are from Psalm. But 119:50 says, your promise revives me. It comforts me in all my troubles. And that one really spoke to me because of the troubles we had that ended us up in that shelter. But my mom was a very faithful person. We didn't spend a lot of time in church, but she was very faithful. And I feel like we rose above that, and we then moved to Osceola, which is where my mom grew up and where a lot of her family is. So we spent some time there. We moved into an apartment complex, and 2 doors down from us lived a man that liked to go outside and play softball with me, would fix my bike, and also made some really good sandwiches. He made a really good grilled cheese sandwich and a really good egg sandwich. To this day is still my favorite. So he was a big part of my life when we lived there, really kind of brought joy back into our lives. And during the process of living there, I didn't realize it, but him and my mom had started dating. So he became a a figure in my life as a father figure. We ended up moving in together and living together. And probably 4 or 5 years after we met him, we were living in a house together. I was in middle school, and on my walk home from school one day, I came home to my house on fire. And watching your house burn is something that you definitely don't wish on anyone. But that's all we could really do. And I remember thinking while we were standing there watching this house burn and knowing that there wasn't going to be anything salvageable from it, that we were homeless again. So living through that twice was kind of emotional. But my mom and her boyfriend did a great job of getting us back on our feet. We were definitely homeless for a while. It was in the month of December. So if you can imagine, living on other people's couches during the holidays was not ideal. And I remember going to school with donated clothes in my backpack and not knowing for sure where I was going to stay that night. A lot of the times people didn't have room for all of us. And so I would be at a friend's house and my parents would be somewhere else. But it was definitely an experience that you don't realize how much people care about you when you go through something like that. The donations and the thoughts and the caring of other people was enormous. So you definitely saw God in those circumstances. So after we got back up on our feet and we got into a new house, later, about a year later, it ended up that we were going to be moving to the Cedar Rapids area. Now, at that time, I was probably 13 years old, and as a 13-year-old, that's pretty crushing to know that you have to leave all your friends and move 3 hours away and start over. So it was a hard time in my life to know that I was being moved across the state, but I also was 13 and I didn't have much of a choice. So we moved, and we moved to a little town called Norway that's not in the Cedar Rapids area, but a little ways out. And shortly after we moved there, my mom decided to get remarried. And she married the guy that was living in that apartment complex a few doors down. And shortly after the marriage, I was approached by them with the idea of adoption. And at 13 years old, being adopted was not something I had ever thought about. But let me tell you that having a man in your life that chooses you is pretty life-altering. It was so blessed. I was so blessed to have him choose me and get to be his daughter. So I went through the adoption process and now call him Dad, which is absolutely amazing. I can't imagine him getting a new teenager, but and at that time, so we blended our families, and so I joined with his kids, which he has a son and a daughter, and my mom had myself and a son also from her second marriage. So there was now 4 of us. So during that time, I also started the high school process of becoming a teenager and going to high school. And when I was in high school, it was the beginning of that sad time where bomb threats became the new normal. We spent a lot of time on the high school football field playing games and watching dogs go in and search our high school. But at the same time that all that was going on, I was also falling in love. A lot of high school girls do that. And that love sometimes causes a lot of drama. And I was not absent from that drama. And my boyfriend, or just having my boyfriend, caused a lot of drama. So it ended up with myself deciding that I could no longer go to high school. So I dropped out. I don't remember if it was my choice or not, but I do remember that I quit high school because of the drama surrounding dating. And it was very ugly what teenagers can do to each other. So my mom was at the time trying to homeschool my little brother and decided that I could do that too. I quickly learned that I did not enjoy being at home at all. So I started taking the testing to get my GED at Kirkwood. And before I was 17, I had my GED and I started working full time. I did not enjoy being at home. I did not enjoy the process at all. So I went to work full time. I did that for a few years because they wouldn't let me into college. They weren't allowed to let me enroll in college until I was 18. So I went to college and in the meantime, had this crazy idea that that boyfriend I had in high school was the one for me. And so a week after I turned 18, we got married. Some people thought we were crazy, including our parents, but they stuck by us. And we've been married for 18 years now. So I think it was probably the best decision I've ever made. But during that time, we were still young and we made some really bad choices and made some really bad decisions financially. And we decided to add a house and kids to the mix. My kids are my life, but they're definitely not the easiest thing to raise when you're still trying to raise yourself. So we learned a lot, and we also dug ourselves a pretty deep hole while we were doing it. During this time, Josh grew up in a very faithful home and wanted to find a church for our kids to go to. And I didn't really have any reference. My mom was very faithful, but she didn't keep us going to church every week. It just wasn't normal. It wasn't a normal occurrence for us. So I was kind of lost. Josh did a lot of the work. We tried out a lot of different churches. And we settled on Marion Methodist because that's where we felt at home. We learned a lot about faith. I had a lot to learn. I had no idea the stories in the Bible. I didn't know how to teach my kids about Jesus. And so coming to Marion Methodist was probably the best thing we did as parents, creating that base for our children to go to Sunday school and to learn about Jesus really made us feel good. So we were back on the right path and we were trying to do the right thing. But during all that, we were keeping a really dark secret. We were not okay financially and we were struggling, and we finally made the decision to file bankruptcy. I think I was only 24 and I was filing bankruptcy. It was mortifying. We lost our house. We didn't have a place to live. Again, homeless. And we were putting our kids through something that hadn't ever really planned on. So we moved in with my in-laws, Josh's mom and dad. At the same time that all this was happening, my parents, who I was very close with, decided that a job was taking them 12 hours away, and they moved to Arkansas. We were never really alone, but man, did I feel alone. So we struggled through that and trying to hide it from everyone, feeling very ashamed and not knowing for sure how to dig ourselves out of that hole. We didn't lean on Jesus how we should have. And looking back on it, I'm very ashamed that we were trying to teach our kids, but we weren't giving the same trust that we should have. So during this time, I'd kind of lost myself. Becoming a mother is hard sometimes. So I decided, and with Josh's support, decided that I would try to put some effort back into finding me. And I found something that I never expected, and that was running. I don't know how I even got into it. I don't know. To this day, don't remember how I decided to sign up for a 5K, but I did. And if you know me, I'm a perfectionist and I jump into things with both feet. So I began training for a 5K. And after that 5K, it was probably 3 weeks later, I signed up for a marathon. And if you know running distances, that's going from 3 miles to 26. So that's a big jump. I started training and quickly found that I was in love with running. Absolutely loved it. And the reason I fell in love with it, I think, is because it gave me that time to build a relationship with Jesus. I spent so many hours alone running that I was able to talk with Jesus. I was able to pray. I felt his presence so many times. I remember running one day and running alongside a deer and feeling like that was Jesus next to me, helping me through that run. And to this day, anytime I struggle, I feel like a deer appears. So I really felt his presence during running, and I gained a relationship with him that I didn't expect because I don't think I truly believed yet. But that definitely grew my faith and made me stronger and made me want to continue. After that first marathon, I was hooked. I absolutely loved it. I loved the process of training. I loved the race. I loved all parts of it. And not a lot of people love running for 6 hours straight, but I did. And I don't know why, because I had no background in it at all. I was learning as I went. And I really thought that running was my missionary. Like, that's what Jesus had planned for me, was to spread his message through running. And I had all these plans. And I signed up for that second marathon. And I decided that second marathon was going to be dedicated to everyone that couldn't run, everyone that couldn't do what they loved, everyone that didn't have the opportunity to do what they loved in life. And so 26 miles, I had 26 people that I put on a band and I put it on my wrist, and each mile was dedicated to a different person. And I prayed for that person. I prayed about that person. I thought about that person for a whole mile. And I ran really slow. So that was a long time that each person got. And that was the most spiritual journey, I think, that I had ever witnessed up until that point in my life. And I just loved it. I knew that that's what I was called to do. I knew that was my point in life. Like, that's what Jesus had planned for me. So I made these big plans to go forward with that. And I was going to do all these things based around running and help all these people. And I quickly found out that I had gotten too comfortable. And I don't think that Jesus was punishing me, but just definitely putting a little a Y in my road. Definitely changed my path. When I was preparing for that third marathon, I had an injury that I would never recover from, or I haven't yet. I injured my back about 6 years ago, and I've had 5 neurosurgeons tell me that I'll never run again. I was crushed, very crushed. And along with losing something that you love, I was in so much pain, a lot of pain. And I quickly found out that my faith was not strong enough. And I not only walked away from my faith, but I quit Jesus. And I just plain old quit. I gave up. So after finding out the medical issues that I had and that running wasn't an option for me anymore, they threw all kinds of meds at me. None of it worked. None of it helped the pain. There were no options for what I had. And instead of meds, I found something else that took away the pain. I found a love for whiskey that I didn't know was going to ruin my life. I started drinking whiskey because it took away the pain like nothing else could. And that pain was the only thing I could think about. So if the whiskey would take it away, I was going to use it. I became really good at disguising my drink. I hid it in everything I drank. I took it with me everywhere I went. I never not had a bottle in the freezer. It became my lifeline. I went to work every day. I didn't drink before work, so I was okay in my mind. I didn't drink and drive, so I was okay. I didn't have a problem. But when I got home from work, that's the first thing I did was fix a drink. Because I deserved it. I'd made it through the day with the pain that I had. I made excuses for drinking that whiskey. My family watched me do it. For 3 years, I just drank. I don't remember much of those 3 years because I spent most of it drunk. I lost a lot those 3 years. I lost time with my kids. I lost a relationship with my husband. I lost friends that walked away because they didn't want to be a part of it. And I didn't care. The whiskey was something that was more important than anything. It was a tough time. And during that time, I didn't care what it cost. I deserved the good stuff because of what I was going through. So I bought it. And I dug ourselves into another hole that to this day I have to live with. I did that. Nobody else did it. I did it. But there's a light in this story. In July of 2016, we decided to take an extended weekend trip to Minnesota to go to the amusement park with the kids. And we were going to stay over with some family that lived there. After a day at the amusement park, I was in rare form. So on the way to this family member's house, we stopped at the liquor store and I bought a bottle, the big one. I needed the big one. And once we got there, I started drinking. I didn't eat dinner. I just drank. And I drank myself into a stupor that no one wanted to be around. I was left alone on a bathroom floor. I had no idea what my family was doing. I didn't care. When I woke up the next morning, I felt awful in more ways than one. But I felt like a terrible mother, a terrible wife, just a terrible person. I remember being very sick on the ride home, but none of it made me think that I was going to stop. I didn't care. I still wanted the drink. In fact, I only made it through half that big bottle, so I brought the rest of it home with me, with intentions of drinking it once I got out of the car. We had to stop to pick up the dogs on the way home, and I have no way of explaining what happened next, other than the Lord stepped in front of me and took over. And I opened the trunk of the car, and I don't even remember thinking about it. It was like I look back on it like it's a dream. I don't even remember reaching for the bottle, but in my head, I can see the whole day play out like I'm watching as a third person. And I grabbed that bottle and I handed it over to my dad and I said, "You have to take this. I can't have it in my life anymore." And that's not something that I would have done. Like at that point in my life, that wasn't a decision I was ready to make. To this day, I still look back on that day and think, I was not in control. Someone else was. And the only way I can explain it is that the Lord stepped in front of me and took over because he knew that I couldn't do it anymore, that I couldn't handle anymore. He handed over that bottle and took it out of my life for me because I couldn't do it. But I also feel like he decided for me that I needed him because I wasn't in the right mind to do it. When I got home and I realized that I didn't have any alcohol, we started having conversations and I made the promise to never bring that bottle back into our lives, that there would never be another one in the freezer or in the cupboard in my house. And thankfully, there hasn't been. I came home and I started volunteering because I didn't know what else to do. I knew that Jesus had just saved my life, but I didn't know how to start over. So I just started volunteering for anything I could get my hands into. I started going to any Bible study I could go to, knowing that I had to figure this out. I had to figure out why he saved me, why he chose me. I started journaling, and I used to carry this journal with me to church every Sunday, and I think people thought I was crazy, but I'd pull it out every Sunday, and I'd take notes. And And I brought that with me so you could see it. But this is a year's worth of bulletins from church, a year's worth of notes, a year's worth of tear-stained pages that I keep as a reminder of that year. It was not easy and was not the end of it, but I did it for a year to try to find my relationship with Jesus again. And it worked. I definitely did it. But it also took a toll on my body, and I had to realize that that wasn't healthy either. So I had to find the balance. I eventually did, with volunteering for what I felt compelled to do and being involved in the things that I enjoyed. But it took a year, and I kept record of all of it, the struggles, the joys, and finding myself again. But I was determined to beat this. But I'm still that strong, independent woman that thought I could do it alone. And Jesus definitely woke me up again. So I was out of town one day, and I was also out of control. Couldn't do anything from where I was to help. And the kids got home from school and realized that there was no electricity. I was mortified. I may have stopped drinking, but I didn't have control of the situation. The damage had already been done. My electricity had been shut off because I hadn't paid the bill in over a year. Those are decisions that I made without anybody else knowing because of the alcohol. And I had to fix it. This led to Josh and I deciding that we were going to go to Financial Peace University for a third time, because third time's a charm, right? I spent hours working on spreadsheets, trying to figure out how long it would take us, what I needed to do, how we could do it. I used the time that I was thinking about the pain and the liquor, and I poured it all into trying to figure out how to never be there again. And I remember the day that Alaya Energy sent me a statement in the mail, and it said $0 due. And I danced around the house. I hung that baby up like a trophy in my house. I took pictures with it and sent it to family and friends. And I still have it to this day. I will never get rid of it because that's my trophy for never going back to that. But I did all this by trusting Jesus. I couldn't have done it alone. And I spent a lot of time in Psalm. Okay, so I'm going to read to you Psalms 32:5. And I found this one while preparing for today and realized that it's also highlighted with a bunch of notes around it. So I must have really leaned on this one. It says, "Finally, I confess all my sins to you and stopped trying to hide my guilt. I said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord, and you forgave me. All my guilt is gone." And I really think that even though I had stopped drinking, he needed me to lay everything out. And that's what that electricity being shut off was. I had to lay everything on the table. I couldn't keep hiding from it. So my new life is without a lot of alcohol. I manage the pain in different ways, healthier ways. But it took a while to become strong enough to pass the liquor aisle in the store without feeling the urge to buy some. I had other medical issues that came upon me through all of this that really brought me down. But I did choose to fight all those battles with Jesus instead of myself. He brought me through, still struggling, but not giving up on him this time. Taught me a lot. This last week, Simon did a sermon, and he said something that really struck a chord with me that I felt like it was worth repeating. He said, Jesus promises to meet us in the midst of our darkest moments, and his compassion has the power to overcome whatever circumstances we face. And that is just a sentence worth putting on my wall, because that is exactly what Jesus did for me. Do I still think about the liquor when I'm in pain? I do. I'm a young adult. I still like to go out and have fun. I try to do it in different ways. But when I say I'm going out, the kids still look at me funny. And that's because I scarred them, and I have to take ownership of that. Do I think I'm forgiven? I do. I spent a long time of that first year learning how to forgive myself and learning how to trust that Jesus forgives me. He's holding my hand every day, cheering me on, and helping me become the woman that he made me to be. I believe that. Do I know what that is yet? No, I feel like it changes every day. And I am not good at letting him take the lead. I will admit that. But I wake up every morning and try. I try to approach every situation thinking about what he would want me to do. Another verse I found is Psalm 46:5. And it says, God dwells in that city. It cannot be destroyed. From the very break of day, God will protect it. And I try to think of that every morning and remember that nothing can break me if I have God with me. During these Lenten moments, we've been reciting this prayer that ends with all of us saying, I cannot do this alone. It couldn't come at a better time for me to remind me that I'm not in this alone. It took me a long time to learn it, but I don't want to do it alone. So I've chose Jesus every day. And I try to continue to do things his way and to listen to him before I listen to myself. This was not an easy thing to share today, but I want to thank you for listening to my story and understanding where I've come from in my journey. And I hope that it helps somebody else in the long run. It was an honor to share it with you. Thank you. Happy Easter.